Hello, welcome again to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay, and our guest today is Nicholas Vesey. Hi, Nicholas.
Hi, Iain.
So, Nicholas has written this book called Developing Consciousness, a Roadmap of the Journey to Enlightenment. And that's the kind of thing that we're interested in, Conscious TV. So I saw the title, I thought, could be a book for us. Now, I looked on Amazon, and I often look at the reviews to see what it says about the books from people that have bought it. And the quote that I love was, how the author changed his life from nasty to nice. I thought, that's our kind of man for Conscious TV, the man that changed his life from nasty to nice. So I know you used to work at Saatchi and Saatchi, big powered advertising agency.
Yeah.
I guess that's the nasty bit that we're just talking about. And now you're working as an Anglican priest,
that's
so
right.
That's the nice bit. So just let's take a few minutes going through your history and just what kind of drew you into the world of advertising in the first place?
Well, I think going back there, my father died when I was 2. So I grew up in a family that was a single parent family. Went away to prep school at the age of 8, where I was fat. Got bullied at prep school and really decided that, you know, what I needed to do in order to make my way in life was to, I think, really make as much noise as I possibly could in order to draw as much attention to myself as I possibly could. And that lent itself to careers like broadcasting and advertising, where it's pretty me all the way. I mean, the idea in advertising is you do an ad, you take it up to the creative director, and they go, wow, that's fantastic, well done, you're amazing. And I like that. I liked it when people told me my ads were great, and that's why they have so many awards in the creative sort of sphere. You know, the Oscars and stuff like that. It's just so that people can go, thank you, I am amazing. And I think that's really what attracted me to the whole advertising bit. And I liked all the film. And actually, tell you the truth, it's quite nice to have a job where all you do is you come in the morning, you sit down there with a cup of tea, and you think, now, what should we do? What should we do for Coca-Cola? How does that, you know, and there's always an old thing, which every creative person has a script in their bottom drawer which says open on a desert island, which really means that you've got to go to the desert island in order to film the commercial. So there's quite fun in creating anything that you want to create and then having it be realized either in sound or in vision, and you know, you can sort of play God a bit with that.
Because before that you were working in local radio, I think, a bit, weren't you? So you had some experience in broadcasting.
That's
and
right.
media.
When I was at university, I remember I was driving down White Ladies Road in Bristol and I saw the BBC. I thought, well, I fancy working there. And I literally just turned into the driveway of the BBC and parked my car. And I walked into reception and I said, I'd like to work here. And the woman said to me, well, who are you? And I said, well, I'm a student. And she said, well, third door on the right. And turns out there was a student program, and it's amazing what you can, you know, you'll black your way into. So I went from there to working on a freelance basis.
It's more than that, because you had a certain belief, didn't you?
Yeah.
And that carries you a long way in life. You went in there, you had the balls to park the car and just drive in and say, I'd like a job.
That's right.
You went in there and it must almost be in your head, well, yeah, I deserve a job here.
I have to, it's embarrassing to say this, but I think it's a public school thing. You know, you get basically at public school, they just tell you, you can do what you like. Yeah. And you do, I mean, not everybody goes that way, but you do get a sense, you're taught in that particular sector of the education that you can have what you want. And if you go out there, you can just get it. And I think, you know, if you've got that sort of mentality, that's part of it, I think. There's also a bit of chutzpah as well, you know, you just, you know, go for it, basically.
Anyway, so you went on to advertising.
That's right.
How did that feel? It sounds very exciting. Was it kind of inside? Was it fulfilling to some extent?
I started off on the business side doing, I was an account manager, and I thought, I saw all these people coming in at 10 o'clock and leaving at 4 o'clock and wearing jeans and t-shirts and stuff like that. And I thought, that's the job for me. Who are they? And they were the creative department. So it was very fulfilling in a sense that it's incredibly competitive. So you are completely driven to actually be the best. I mean, I eventually got myself a job as a creative guy, a copywriter in an advertising agency called Footcone and Belding. And when we got there, I was with this other guy. We both said, well, this isn't where we want to be. We want to be at Saatchi's. And so the moment wherever you are, you want to get to the next bit. And I liked that. But I have to also say that, it does tend to be fueled with drink and drugs as well. I mean, it's a creative area. It's a very difficult thing, because once you've smoked a joint and created a great ad, then, 2 months down the line, you get really stuck. And you think, well, what am I going to do now? How am I going to, come up with the goods? And you remember, well, actually, I smoked a joint and came up with a really good ad last time. So you'll, roll a big joint, smoke it, and that's how creative dependency comes along.
Yeah.
And luckily I wasn't in it long enough to really have that hit. But, there was, in those days, in the 70s, in advertising, there was a lot of cocaine. And luckily I didn't get down that route. But I think part of me was sort of running to catch up all the time. I wasn't as creative as I think I needed to be in order to do the job effortlessly. And I think if you're in the creative side of things, it needs pretty much to be, although it is supposedly 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration, that's what they always say with creative work, you do need to have that relaxed center while you're doing it. Otherwise, you're feeding on sort of more dark matters, and you tend to be serving a different sort of God, really.
Yeah, we don't have time to really go into this now, but my experience of people that are really creative, almost genius, is that actually they're quite unbalanced, and they are using drugs and things to access an area which is still consciousness. It's brilliant ideas coming through, but it's coming through because they're slightly unhinged, they're not so centered.
I think there's a percentage of it, but I wouldn't like to say that all people are like that. I mean, the Einsteins of this world, and, people who are, I think people are genuinely, Mozart, for example, I suppose he might be seen to be unhinged, but I think there is a place for genuine, inspired creativity as well.
Anyway, we're sticking to your life here. We'll leave Mozart for the time. We tried to get him, but he was busy.
Yes, that's right.
So you went to the Himalayas.
I went to the Himalayas, yes.
What was the reason for that?
Well, I was at a drinks party, and I ended up invited a girl out to an Indian restaurant, a drinks party, and we were sitting there in this Indian restaurant, and literally from nowhere she said, "I'm going to India on my holidays in a couple of months' time. Would you like to come?" I didn't have any plans, so I said, "Yeah, sure." Now, what I didn't realise, that she was going on a big trek that was going to walk 125 miles up 14,000 feet over sort of 2 weeks.
Right.
And in the middle of the Himalayas, it's called a circular trek, where you don't go back to your hotel, but you have to you have given a trowel to go and poo in the woods, and, all that sort of stuff. And it wasn't me at all. I hated it. We were off in the middle of nowhere, and fording over rivers and all that sort of business.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it does sound fantastic, but I mean, I was more of a home person. I didn't like all that.
Okay.
I hated it, But then, I got up to above the cloud line, and you just, when you're up there in the mountains, and at night, and when you're above the cloud line, the cloud is like a sea of cloud beneath you, and the peaks just come through. And I remember I sort of staggered up to this top of this mountain and sort of sat down in my chair, and I looked out there, and there was this incredible scene, and there was a huge moon. And I remember I just looked out and just went, wow! I mean, it was a huge wow. I didn't think anything had changed in me. But my mother told me when I got home, when she saw me coming off the plane wearing Indian clothes and claiming to be vegetarian, that she knew that something was up. This wasn't the dear lad that she'd sent off. She was happy with me and my old self, living in flat and doing whatever I wanted to do. But yes, when I went vegetarian, and I sort of, from that moment on, I thought, because actually when you grow up in a single parent family and bullied and stuff like that, there's something unhealed. And for me, there was something unhealed in me. And there was a sort of sense of pain. I was never really very au courant with my emotions. And if you're not au courant if you're not happy comfortable with your emotions, what happens is it's like being an engine without any oil in it. And it overheats and burns. And, when I got into those situations, you experience pain. And you really want a way out of that pain. And so drugs, drink, sex becomes a way that I used to feel peaceful. And I remember the first time I smoked a joint, I thought, I can't believe it, I'm not feeling any pain. And I didn't realise that everybody, you know, didn't have the sort of pain that I was experiencing. And for me, the spiritual direction, I saw a way through that I used to go down the street and see tramps in the side of the road. And I just knew that my lifestyle was dysfunctional. And I knew that I couldn't sustain it over a long period of time, no matter how much money I had. And I knew I'd end up in that situation unless I did something.
Really? You knew that?
Somewhere in me, I had a shiver every time I went past a sort of gentleman of the road, as they're called, you know, and sitting there. And I just knew that there by the, you know, I could end up there. And the spiritual journey, it just suggested to me that there was a way through that could be that could be enriching. And I went for it. I thought...
Because when you came back from the Himalayas, you got hold of Yogananda's book.
Well, I went and saw my friend. I was into the spiritual thing then. You know, I was like Toad of Toad Hall, poop, you know, spirituality. You know, let's go for it. So, you know, I had this friend of mine who I knew was into spirituality because I bought his stereo off him cheaply when he'd gone off to see his guru in India. And I went and saw him and I said, look, what's it all about? And he said, well, you are in everything and everything is in you. I said, that's a lot of help. Thanks very much indeed. You know, and he said, look, read this. And it was Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi. Yeah. And it was fantastic. I mean, for me, what was amazing about it is that this guy was writing with the certainty of another aspect of reality that I hadn't really considered. And he didn't just sort of like think, well, would you like to consider this? When I read his book, I felt that he knew it. It wasn't something academic, and he knew it, and I wanted that. You know, I wanted that certainty.
What did the wanting in you feel like?
What a question. What did the wanting in you feel like?
I tell you why I'm asking, because there was the wanting, like the BBC job, the wanting in Saatchi and Saatchi to create the brilliant advert, but I've got the feeling this had a different texture to it.
Well, that's kind. I mean, it probably did have a lot of the same kind of texture to it, I have to say, like Toad. I mean, I must say that, in a sense, I probably, you know, was going for it in a similar sort of way, because I do go through 4 things one pointedly, and, you know, tell you the truth, I still do. But I think what was different about it is that the whole nature of the journey challenged the nature of the reality that I'd set up for myself. I was including the possibility that I would have to change completely. And I was at that point where I was willing to give up. That's it.
So that's a big difference.
Yes. Yeah. I'd come to the end of the road of doing it myself, and I realized that I hadn't created the wisdom that I'd be able to sustain my life.
That's a huge realization. Huge. Yeah. So I then, well, I tried to do every course I could get hold of, you know. You read loads of books.
Well, Yogananda, for example, he had this thing called the Self-Realization Fellowship, which I think still exists, actually. And I remember it, you know, at the back of the book, it had the address in California. And I wrote to them, and in those days, there's no internet. You had to write by mail, and it came back. And they said, if you'd like to receive these, our meditations, but we will send them by sea. They'll take 3 months to arrive, and they'll cost you £25. So I sent them 100 quid and told them to send them by email. You know, I did it, you know, not by airmail. Yeah. I wanted it, you know, and so I went and did loads of courses. I went and did, you know, those sorts of things. You know, wanting that sort of understanding of what it was. And interestingly enough, I think a lot of the courses, you know, that I did, were dealing with some of the other issues that I had, which was the lack of emotional engagement, the distancing.
Yeah. So it's working more with the personality side.
I think so. I mean, I wasn't a particularly tactile person. You know, I was fairly dysfunctional in terms of my relationships with women. Yeah. And coming out of that, I began to be much more of a sort of huggy type of person, if you know what I mean. And I think something got dealt with at that particular level.
And then you had an experience, didn't you, about 7 months later?
Yeah.
Can you describe what happened?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm fairly embarrassed about this because it was such a short period of time.
But it's in your book, though. So
I'm not embarrassed, not sufficiently embarrassed not to talk about it. But it is embarrassing when I went for a search of 6 months, and then this experience happened, which, you know, it's a short period of time. But and it's very interesting when you talk about these sorts of experiences, they always sound terribly trite. I mean, even if you ask the Buddha, he'd say, well, I was sitting beneath this tree and I decided, it does sound. And for me, it was a bit like that, And I was literally, I was sitting in a room with a group of friends, and we were all sitting around, and I was, there was some music on, and someone said to me, do you play the guitar? And I said, I didn't. And they said, well, why don't you try? And I picked up this guitar, and I think what happened is that I was linked into the auditory. I was trying to listen to the music and play the guitar. And while I was doing that, the whole nature of the reality that I experienced suddenly changed. And right at the moment, Iain, what's happening is you're there and I'm here. And, we got walls and ceiling and there are cameras and there's, guys over there operating all the stuff. And there's distinct boundaries between us. But what suddenly happened is that sort of dissolved. And I suddenly experienced myself as part of something much bigger than myself. It was as if my small consciousness was a part of a much greater consciousness. And it was almost like I felt like a glove puppet. There was something much bigger with its hand up my bottom, sort of, if you know what I mean. And I was just there. And not only that, but when I looked out, it was almost as if that everything out there was sort of linked by some sort of fiber optic mini little bit of light that was linked somewhere back in the depths of my consciousness. And I experienced a total connection between myself, everything that was out there, and everything that was in that greater consciousness. And I suddenly, it was almost like a big clunk happened, and I just sort of recognized the experience I was having as being the experience that people had written about in books. I thought, well, this is it. Absolutely, this is what it's meant by it. And I totally saw it as a nature of reality that I had been reading about and understanding about. Now, I don't think anyone else in the room had that particular experience, and it lasted about 3 hours. It didn't last particularly long. But it totally literally blew my mind in terms of my own understanding of what was going on. I went home to my flat, and I didn't leave for 3 days. I sat in my room, and I just tried to work out what I'd seen. And then when I did come out, I thought, forget it. Just pretend this hasn't happened. Just walk out there. And I just couldn't get my head around the fact that it wasn't that way round, That there wasn't.
So you walk out the flat.
Yeah.
What was your reality?
Well, I walked out the flat, and there was just as it all was before. But I just knew it's like once you've seen the ocean, you can't unsee it. Once you've seen snow, you can't not know that snow exists. Once you've ridden a bicycle, you can't unlearn riding a bicycle. Once you've seen a snapshot of what reality is really like, that there is a fundamental interconnectedness between all things, I couldn't unknow that. And yet there were newsreaders on the news, reading news as if there wasn't a connection. People were wandering about the place as if they're all totally separate, in a totally different reality. And everybody was living that way. And I thought, well, what do I do about this? And it was interesting, really. And for me, it was a bit like, it's a bit like you get invited to a drinks party at 10 Downing Street, right?
I have been, actually.
Have you?
Yeah.
Well, let's say one does, so it's very good. And you decide you need to pee in the middle of the drinks party. So you go off, and you go to the loo, and you open the door to the loo, and there, sitting on the loo, is the Prime Minister. And you look there at the Prime Minister, and he looks at you, but his head is on the floor. And in place of his actually head is a sort of alien head here. And you look at him, and he looks at you, and you know that the Prime Minister is an alien. And the Prime Minister looks at you, and he knows that you know. And then you shut the door, and you walk off, and then you're faced with it. Do you go out there and tell everybody, hey guys, the Prime Minister's an alien? Or do you just shut up and pretend you haven't seen it and just carry on with their life as it was? And I was faced with that choice. And I just couldn't not go with the idea that that was the nature of reality. So I was working at Saatchi and Saatchi at the time. And I went in and I resigned. It's taken me 3 years to get this job. And I resigned. And I remember Tim Bell was the managing director at the time. He called me into his office. And he said, you're mad. I think he was probably right. He's
on that level, you probably were.
Yeah, I think that. He said, look, we've just won the general election. Mrs. Thatcher has just got into power.
Yeah.
You've got this job. You've taken 3 years to get here. We are right on the brink of something here, and you want to go. I said, yeah, I do. I just knew that that was the direction.
Did you try and explain what had happened to you, to anybody there?
I did a bit, but, you know, I mean, they knew I was, you know, barking at some level. You know, they just knew I'd gone. You know, there was something about it that had, you know, that they knew that I was probably going to be trouble. You know, they were probably pleased that I'd left in the end without any lawsuits or anything. But that was, I had enough of that. And I went to, and actually I left, and I had to keep body and soul together. So I remember I delivered leaflets for a wine company for a while. Yeah, so that's...
But it takes courage to do that kind of thing. There's one part of you must be saying to you, well, this is an exciting job, this is lots of money, this is giving me status. Did it not take courage, or was it just completely 100% clear cut?
Well, it's interesting that when you say that, it reminds me of, you know, Yes Minister, when the minister says to him, well, Minister, that's a very courageous decision you're taking there. And the minister says, is it really a courageous decision? You know? But when you're in that situation, people did say to me, you know, it has taken courage to do this, but I didn't feel that.
Yeah, okay.
I just felt that I just
knew.
knew.
I
just knew.
Yeah.
And
so in a way, you were kind of pretty out the way. Something was just happening, wasn't it?
I just knew that
the you was quite small in this situation.
I think it was, yes.
Yeah.
I think that I didn't really consider... It was so much a greater sort of thing that had happened.
Yeah.
The whole idea of advertising. You know, my life then was about... Literally was about... I felt it was my duty to bear witness to this experience.
Yeah.
You know, that if I'd had this glimpse, then I jolly well needed to actually let other people know that this was the nature of the reality as far as I saw it.
And then you got involved with this exegesis movement, didn't you?
Well, I mean, I looked around and I thought, you know, what am I going to do? You know, how do you do that? And the last course that I'd done was this course done by this organisation called the Exegesis Programme that ran... There's something called, at the time, the Earhart seminar trainings, and they were sort of like instant, in 3 days in a hotel room.
Yeah,
and you change your life and stuff like that. And I'd done that, and I had a big impact. And for me, the church, I mean, miles away. I saw the church really as a sort of the bag lady of spirituality. This sort of old lady going along the road with a supermarket trolley with all this useless stuff, you know, going along that they would use for whatever arcane reasons, but no good to man or beast really. But this organisation was young. It was theistic. You know, it was it had the same sort of understanding of the nature of the reality that I was there, and it was exciting.
Yeah.
So I went and again blagged my way into a job there, and started to work as a trainer in that place.
And you worked there for several years, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I worked my way up on the sort of training side to actually taking the trainings there, and that took about sort of 3 or 4 years. Doing that. And then after that, the organisation decided that it wanted to get into politics, which sounds sort of bonkers, but they started in 1981 a telephone marketing company called Programs Limited, which is very early for telephone. It was right at the beginning. There were only 3 or 4 of them around. And that, because the skills of, this was sort of self-awareness training, the skills of self-awareness training are pretty much communication skills and stuff like that, and you can use that in telephone communication. So they started that. And I got involved in that. And then they began to get involved with we got involved with the Liberal Party and the SDP. And we fought a GLC election in Deptford, and I managed that campaign. And then we started to work for David Owen and the Gang of 4, as it was, in the SDP, doing direct marketing from them. And then we fought a general election seat. My business partner was the candidate, and I was the campaign director, and we fought a general election seat in Deptford. So we did the whole political route.
And how was your realisation when you were doing this political work? Did you feel integrated with the realisation?
Well, in a sense, I had an understanding of the nature of reality as being a sort of unity of consciousness, that, you know, that things were connected. And so what I was looking for was a platform with the ability to actually communicate some of these ideas. Yeah. Now, the whole idea of the politics was, you know, where one can do something in a public stance, coming from that place, and some of the decisions one can make from an idea of all things are connected are, you know, they're sort of decisions around compassion and things like that. And it seemed to us, to be a good platform through which to communicate some of these ideas.
Did you feel your realization deepening? Did you feel it strengthening, manifesting in different ways, or was it always just there as a base?
Well, it was pretty much there as a base, and I think during that time, what I was attempting to do was to have my body and my personality catch up with the understanding that I got.
That's
because
very interesting.
you've
Okay,
got your
yeah.
understanding,
Yeah.
but you're still totally messed up. You know, your body's still wanting you to go and do stuff that you don't really want to, you know, that's not necessarily appropriate. You're not living like an enlightened Buddha. You know, you're still living a normal existence. And it's a very difficult thing because you aspire to this sort of idea that all things, and, you know, I'm still in that place, you know. You aspire to the idea of this connection and the great nature of things. Then you've got to go to the loo and have a poo, you know. The whole lot is a great contradiction in the way that one lives. And I think a lot of my time, particularly in that period, was of exploring out how that understanding cashed out in my own personal life and with the relationships I had with other people.
Yeah, so your relationships with other people were changing, presumably.
They were. I was still fairly dysfunctional, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I must say that, you know, I went off on different sort of journeys. I did arrive at a few dead ends, quite a lot of dead ends, you know, when I was still going down that particular route.
Yeah. So this is something that really interests me, is this what I would call the integration. You have you have a new reference point.
That's right.
And then you talk about the catching up.
Yes.
Can you talk more about that? Because I think that's very helpful for people.
Yeah.
Maybe some practical examples if you have some.
Well, I think for me, the catching up is really about how do you develop a sustainable lifestyle? How do you develop a life that is enriching, that sustains you and that sustains others? And it's not simply an ego trip where you're telling people what you think is the situation and then forcing them to understand life the way you do. And really, you're just running a different number on them. And to some extent, it's realizing the extent to which one is doing that and seeing the times when your behavior doesn't match up to the ideal that you've got. And so what I found is that gradually I saw the need to develop a meditation practice. And, you know, I began to develop my own meditation practice and start that fairly early on. And I began to, you know, see how I can develop a bit more of a sense of stillness. I began to see how dysfunctional my relationships were, particularly with women. You know, that they were pretty selfish and, you know, self-orientated in the terms that I did that. I began to see the extent to which, you know, how much was I prepared to put my principles on the line or go for the cash? Because you've always got that temptation. You know, do you go for the cash or do you go for the principles? And actually, after about 14 years, I found myself living in a flat in Hampstead, owning a Jaguar, driving into an office in Knightsbridge to work as a marketing consultant. And I sort of realised I was back where I started. But actually, I'd moved on a bit, and I had developed this meditation practice. And I used to run the Paris office for a while, and it's a fairly lonely place, Paris. And I used to go and hang out in Notre Dame and Sacré-Cœur. And I began to sort of do meditation on the Lord's Prayer, which someone came along and said that, look, you can look at the Lord's Prayer as this thing that people just say off in rote, or you can see that it is actually a combination, that if you follow the steps of it, unlocks a different level of consciousness. I talk a bit about that in the book. And I started to do that. And I remember saying to my friends, you know, I remember saying, I'm getting the awful feeling that I'm becoming a Christian. I just quietly say to them, they say, oh no, surely that can't be true. You know, like say you've got some awful illness, you know. I don't know, I'm not feeling particularly comfortable.
So what pulled you to the Lord's Prayer?
Well, a chap called John Pettifer. We used to have lectures at this company I worked for about things like Peter Russell came and lectures on the Earth as an organism, and someone came, you know, someone came and gave us a lecture about Woden, and we had lectures on stuff like NLP. There was a flavour of the month, you know. Mostly we did our colours, you know. We did all different things, you know, to try and sort of see what we could do. And someone came and gave a lecture. A chap called John Pettifer came and gave a lecture on the Lord's Prayer, and he just blew my mind with the way that he described it. That when you say, for example, Father of us, you acknowledge the existence of other. You acknowledge that one is within. You know, the one who is in the heavens. You then acknowledge the place of that other within one's relationship. And it just was an amazing sort of opening up experience.
And so from there you developed the prayer, and then something was obviously pulling you or drawing you back to Christianity.
Well, I mean, never been really in Christianity. I mean, I was Church of England, I'd been confirmed, I was in the choir for 10 years, I'd done all that stuff, but I never really engaged with the spirituality of it. And but I did feel, I mean, I was uncomfortable with the sort of the business side of things, you know, security, you know, all that sort of stuff that a modern company has on board. And I was much more comfortable with the Lord's Prayer, with the, I was comfortable with the Beatitudes and things like that. And I felt, you know, I felt this was where I was possibly being led. And also, you know, I felt I was in the God business, if you like. You know, that I'd got an understanding of the nature of reality, whether you like to call God, whatever. And that, you know, I shouldn't be in advertising, again, marketing, but I needed to be in the God business. And so I thought, where am I going to go to be in the God business? And as well as this leaning, I thought, well, I'm not going to change my name to Prem Anand something or other, you know. And, you know, my mother'd never forgive me about it, you know. I mean, it was just too embarrassing. You know, my friends, oh, my name's, you know, Aniket, or whatever it is.
I did it, but there you go.
I know, yeah, but I wasn't going to do that. And yellow's not my colour, or orange, and so I wasn't going to do that. And I just looked around and I just thought, well, actually, in England, there is only one game in town where you get, it's a profession, where you get treated sensibly, where you can actually operate out of that, where people don't say you're bonkers if you talk about God, and that's the church. Yeah. So it was with that I began to go towards the church. Yeah. And I remember the way it happened is I was on a running machine in the Hyatt Carlton Hotel, and I was running along, and I was trying to weigh out whether I ought to leave this company or not. And I was looking down at Cadogan Square, and I remember this I was trying to say, should I leave or not? And I remember this voice in my head saying, well, would you be prepared to die for me? I thought, well, I'm an arrogant sod, you know, I'd be prepared to die for what I believe in. And then this voice said, well, what's the big deal about leaving this company then? I thought, well, right, obviously, you know, this is, in the scheme of things, this isn't very much. So I left on that basis and went along, and I was gaily going along towards the church in a fairly sort of like random way, you know, just with the idea of, like the way beforehand, you know, this is what I was going for. And I was at a drinks party, I remember, and I was obviously having a drinks party. I was whittering onto this woman that I was going to be, you know, wanted to be ordained in the Church of England, and she looked at me and she said, have you actually accepted Christ as your saviour? And I looked at her and I said, no, actually I haven't, funnily enough, I haven't. And then she gave me all this, enough space, more space than she didn't say anything. And interestingly enough, I went back to my meditation practice, and I was doing this sort of my normal meditation. And then I did a sort of, is anybody out there type thing. And I said, look, you know, if there is, if you're out there, you know, just, I'm inviting you in. And I suddenly had this immense sense of joy about not being alone. And it was almost as if there was a desktop, you know, and suddenly a new icon appeared on my desktop, a sort of Christ icon, if you like, that was there. And I thought, well, you know, something's there. And then I had this incredible feeling of embarrassment, that really, in my spiritual life, I'd never really served anybody but myself. And I felt incredibly embarrassed about this, and, you know, all this sort of stuff around that. And then when I got over that, I suddenly realised that I'd gone through the two hoops that you're supposed to go through to sort of go into the sort of Christian worldview, and that actually I was kosher. You know, I'd actually done the sort of experiential kosherness to actually become a Christian. And then I was sort of the other side, you know, I'd done it, you know, my own thing. And then for me, it was quite interesting because all this sort of guff that you hear about Christianity, you know, what you've really got inside is Aladdin's cave of jewels, of understanding and contemplative nature, and, you know, the whole non-dual, the whole you are connected with everything and everything is in you. That stuff is just totally at the centre of the whole Christian work, you know, sort of understanding. So I felt very comfortable with that.
And so you became a priest.
And so I sort of went up to, you had to get selected. It's like going to the army. You have to go along for a weekend and they all sort of inspect you and tell you whether you're kosher or not. And I sort of got through that, and then I went up to theological college. Yeah. Let's
move on and talk a bit about your book, which I did enjoy. And the one of the things I pulled out was, and it's kind of, I think your process you've talked about very much is connected with this. You talk about this, I think you got it from the internet, and you talk about a group of students who were asked to list what they thought were the 7 wonders of the world. And most people in the class put things down and they worked it out, and the most popular 7 wonders were, they're fairly obvious, the pyramids of Egypt, the Taj Mahal, Grand Canyon, etc. And there's one girl that didn't say anything, and the teacher asked her, is she okay? What did she write down? And she wrote her 7 wonders of the world, which is very touching. The first one is to touch, to taste, to see, to hear, to feel, to laugh, and to love. And for me, that kind of symbolises your journey to some extent. You've had the kind of the Taj Mahal lifestyle, the pyramids, the Grand Canyon, everything else. And then when you come back, now with you here, it is a miracle. I can see you, I can hear the buzz in the studio, I can feel what I'm feeling, I can hear my voice. That is the real miracle.
It is amazing, isn't it? The miracle is that we're alive. I mean,
Absolutely.
even that, the fact that we're, you go to any brain surgeon or any scientist, or say, how'd you get here? Tell me how you got into your conscious life. And they won't have a clue.
Yeah.
But the amazingness of being alive is the thing we all take for granted. We totally take it for granted. We just don't think about it. We don't even consider. When you write down, what you're thinking for the next year, you don't write, well, the amazing thing is that I'm still alive and I'm here. And unless you've had a big brush with death or something like that, you just accept the fact that you're alive as being just there. And similarly with your emotions. You get up in the morning, and your mind just says, oh, yet another day, oh, no, I've got to do this. He's left the tube off the toothpaste again. All that sort of stuff, comes out. But we're not sort of, amazed at the wonder of where we're at. And I think one has to really reconnect with what it is to be alive and the amazingness of actually sharing that sense of consciousness. And I really think that's absolutely the key to all things, really.
Yeah, you have a little section on realizations in the book, and your realization 1, you say, you are always exactly in the right place to be able to take the next step. Your whole life has brought you to this point.
Yeah.
Talk more about that.
Well, that's that old, isn't it? There's that old joke about the farmer who's the two journey people that are walking along, and they come across a farmer who's sitting on a bench. And they say to him, to the farmer, could you tell me how to get to Dublin? And the farmer says to him, well, if I was going to get to Dublin, I wouldn't want to start from here. And we do think about that in our lives. Where you want to get to, you feel that you're starting from the wrong place.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that we're always in exactly the right place to go forward, because our lives, everything in our lives, has led us up to this one moment now. All of your life has led you to this one moment now, here. All the things that we've done, and everything is present. And if you can take that present and give that moment its due import, it means you can take the next step with a view of taking everything into consideration and really restart your journey from now. And I think that's it's such a freeing thing, really. And that is essentially the nature of recreation that is in the whole Christian. That's the whole nature of recreation in the Christian stuff. That actually, if you come to the moment of the present, moment, you can totally be refreshed and be able to take the next step with complete consciousness that you're being led in the right direction.
And you talk about 100% of our life is made up out of consciousness, and we hardly ever examine it.
Yes. I mean, I find it amazing that, there is nothing else but consciousness. There's all the stuff and ideas that I've got about my life and all the things, but really, right now, our consciousness is absolutely everything that we've got, and everything that we appreciate, everything that we are, everything that we do is taking place within my consciousness. And I am the one person that can explore my consciousness. I can't, there's no point in asking someone else to do it for me or to give me really good ideas about it, because actually it's my consciousness. And my life, I find that my life is about exploring the nature of my consciousness.
And how do you do that on a practical basis?
Well, I find that it's a continual process of reflection. Now, I mean, I start off with a practice in the morning, a spiritual practice. And, you know, for me, the idea of starting in the morning, of starting with a process of reflection, I have a sort of meditation practice and stuff like that. You're completely opening yourself up to whatever wants to come through and whatever reflection you want to get, or whatever's there. And then having done that, it's about realizing that life is about putting everything into that present moment and hearing from that present moment and living it completely before we go on to the next moment. Because, you know, I could be sitting here talking to you, and really I could be thinking about endless other things and rejigging my life and really just going through the motions of what I'm doing here. Most of the time we do that. But if I am really giving myself 100% to you right now, and really giving myself to that present moment, then something essential in myself is connecting with something essential with you and with that moment, and that will move me on. And then I need to sort of reflect on where that's taken me. You know, am I totally out of whack with what's going on? I need to listen to what you've got to say to me, and, you know, what reflection you've got to me, or what happens. And then I need to reflect again on what I do next. And each moment, you're really at a crossroads, and you can make a decision as to what you do next. And in a sense, that's how I try to live life. And it's continually trying to do that. And for me, the practice in the morning is practicing doing that. Because when you're doing a meditation practice, let's take the practice I'm doing meditation.
Yeah.
All there is in meditation is breath. All there is breath. And I do a meditation on the breath. And actually, it's interesting, when you're, in my job sometimes, you have to be with people that are dying. And when you're with someone that's dying, all there is the breath. I don't know if you've been with someone dying, but all you can hear is, and you just wait, you don't know if the next breath's going to come. And it's like, and that person is just with his breath. And in that moment in meditation, you really just totally die to all there is but that experience of breath without trying to take it anywhere else. And you become just that moment of breath. And you practice being in probably the most boring thing you can do, which is just breathing. And that sort of, for me, opens up, I mean, it's much more interesting talking to you than it is just breathing. So if I can practice just breathing, then when it comes to being with you, then I've got much more of a chance that I can really be with you rather than be thinking about something else.
So, as I understand it, it's about putting as much as you can on your side to help be the main part of your day being the focus on that moment. And there's a lot of preparation in that. It doesn't come easy. I know for myself that you'd have to do a lot of meditation, a lot of practice to actually get more used to being in that space. The more you are used to being in it, the easier it will come. But it's like being really good at tennis or football or anything else. You've got to practice a lot to become the best.
I think that's true. And it does sound, when I say that, it sounds like, well, that sounds like a lot of hard work, you know, doing all that. But when you see someone playing at Wimbledon, they're not thinking about it.
No, but they've worked bloody hard.
They're not thinking about it. They're not, you know, they're not sort of thinking, oh, now, am I going to go a cut here? What should I? They're not.
No,
they are completely not, you know, the zen of archery.
They're
in
the zone.
They're in the zone.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is about getting to the point where you're out of the way completely and you're just in the zone. And you just, like an arrow, you've let yourself go. And you know somewhere that you've done the homework. And so you trust the fact that you're going to land on the spot.
Yeah, no, being in the zone is brilliant, but it often takes work to get there and stay there, realization number 2, you are not the mind. And you say, that's a tricky one, because who is considering the question? The mind has a monopoly.
Yeah.
I think that's where all of us are quite a lot of the time for some of the time for others. We're in the mind and we're wanting to find out who we really are.
Yes.
There's a sincerity of the question, and yet it's very hard to get past that monopoly, as you call it, of the mind.
Yes. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, I have a room full of people in front of me and I say, you are not your mind. And you could feel them going, what do you mean I'm not my mind? Of course I'm my, what do you mean I'm not my mind? You know, of course I've invested in my mind. That's of course who I am. And, you know, you'd see it in different circumstances. You know, people, if someone challenges somebody else's opinion, they completely take it personally. And you identify with your minds. Wars break out because people identify with their minds and their ideas. And we are encouraged to completely identify with our minds. And our minds want us to do that too. So when you say to someone, you're not your mind, the mind will say, oh, don't listen to him. Absolutely ridiculous. Of course you are. You know, we have developed together, you and me and you, this personality that is uniquely you. You are totally unique as a personality, and let's keep it that way. You know, you don't know where you're going to go if you start letting go of all these sorts of stuff. But I always think the word personality is an interesting word. It comes from the Greek word persona, and that means the persona was the mask that the Greek actors used to display anger or hatred. They wore a mask in the ancient times rather than actually just doing it straight, and their mask was called the persona. So your personality really is that which you speak through. It is the mask that you speak through. And my experience has been that my mind really, although it's told me a lot of things to do to get out of the situations I've been in, I arrived at that moment, which was a dead end, where I knew there was something fundamentally dysfunctional about my mind.
Yeah.
And that moment of giving up, of realizing that I'd come to the end of the understanding of what my mind could tell me, was a realization of saying there is something more than my mind. There is something, if I can get beyond that, something fundamentally eternal. And I sort of reached for that. The whole spirituality thing was like reaching for a greater wisdom. That's something that was beyond the learned, conditioned responses and automaticity that my mind brought me simply to, that was going to end me up in a street with begging and with no money. Because all it could do is learn badly from the things that had happened in the past. And there was no way of showing how to get through it.
So where are you now with that, how you see the mind? Who's seeing the mind?
Well, I think that, where my understanding, for me, I've got to that point where I recognize the fact that my consciousness is a function of a greater consciousness. And that, in a sense, I feel that my role in life is to try and allow that greater consciousness to come through, and the wisdom that greater consciousness has to come through and to inform my mind and to work together with my mind in order that my mind might conform to the purposes of that greater consciousness. And so it's still very much a work in progress. You know, I'm still learning all the time about what's what and what's going on. But I sort of feel that to some extent I hope I'm being led.
Right. Yeah, so just to repeat, you feel there's a consciousness which is somehow you, and that's being led by greater consciousness. Is that?
Yeah, that's right. I think that, you know, if I use sort of Christian terminology, you know, the whole idea of, you know, when someone asks Jesus, where is the kingdom of heaven? Big question. He didn't. He normally talks about birds of the air and the sea and all that sort of, you know, lots of stuff. He says the kingdom of heaven is within you. Now that is an amazing piece of information. And then you go back. You go back to, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, to the burning bush, Moses. You know, go. God says to Moses, go and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And Moses says to God, no, I don't know how to. You know, who are you? What's your name? And when you ask God his name, particularly in Hebrew terms, it's really, what is your nature? He's asking, who are you? Big question in the Bible. Ask God, who are you? And God could have said anything. He could have said, I am the God of hellfire. He wouldn't have said that, but you know, he could have said, I am the God of vengeance. I am the God of this. Or I am the God of love. We could come up with all that sort of stuff. He didn't come up with any of that. He said, I am who I am. Tell them I am sent you. Tell them I am sent you. Now, it's locating the very nature of who we are as really deep within the identity of who we are. So for me, evolution is not about, you know, the selfish gene. It's not about all that sort of stuff. It is about the evolution of consciousness. And that as evolution has come, what evolution has been is about consciousness evolving. And as consciousness evolves and becomes more aware, it then develops the material aspects that can then serve that consciousness to become more aware of itself. And the final moment of that consciousness is when all of us are suddenly aware of the nature of that consciousness. And that's the end game.
Yeah.
That, to me, is what the second coming is.
Okay.
Is suddenly...
I totally get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said earlier it's still work in progress for you,
Yeah.
but there seems to be tremendous wisdom in that work in progress. And my guess is the speed of movement is, for full integration, is increasing the whole time. Do you feel that?
Well, I can shoot a good line. Do you know what I mean? I mean, really, Iain.
You're making light of it,
yeah,
but
I know,
quite
but
serious.
I can. You know,
You're
I've done
dodging
this,
the question a bit.
Well, no, listen, I'd love to think that. You see, listen, I mean, you know, using Christian terminology, and my understanding of the nature of Christ, right? Yeah. I've got a definition of what the nature of Christ is. And by, you know, when you say Jesus Christ, Christ is not his surname. It's a sort of almost like the... It speaks of the nature of the reality. My understanding of the nature of Christ consciousness, the nature of Christ is that Christ is activating wisdom. It is activating wisdom. So my desire in life is to be a function of that activating wisdom and to be led by that. And I do find, you know, it is constantly, you know, you're constantly trying, you know, how much you're bullshitting, how much you're really living the life. And it is a constant battle to actually, to be honest with yourself and not, because it's so tempting, isn't it, you know, to try and, you know, live an easy life or take the cash or whatever you want to do. Because you've got those things going on. I've got, you know, I've got a wife, I've got children. You know, I need to keep body and soul together. And there's that tension between the ideal and you know, living a life, really.
We've got about 3 minutes left. There's a lot of practical wisdom in your book, and I found it an easy read. I don't mean easy insofar as there wasn't a lot of depth in there, but easy insofar as so many books like this can be quite introverted and in a way not accessible. I didn't feel that with your book, and you have examples from yourself and other people. Is there any, just briefly in a minute or two, is there any bits you want to talk about that we haven't mentioned so far?
Well, I think why I wrote the book's quite, you know, I think when I had that experience a while ago, and when I started to become interested in spirituality, I wanted a book that told me what it was all about. And, you know, you go into the bookshop, and there are loads of books in Warston's or whatever it was in those days. But, you know, it's so difficult to get any sort of sense out of them. They either want you to join their organisation or they'll tell you that, you know, if you buy the first 10 sessions of their meditation, then you can get the you're not ready to hear what the ground is or, you know, we mustn't tell you this now because your mind's not ready for it. And no one will actually put down what the territory is about the whole nature of enlightenment.
Right.
And I'd have loved a book that just laid it all out. I'm not saying that this is how to do it, but this is the sort of ground area that you're going to cover.
As you call it, a roadmap to the journey of enlightenment.
Exactly. It's a roadmap. I don't know, you know, how we all get there in different ways.
Yeah.
And you can't tell someone how you're going to get there because we've had totally different lives, you and I. So how on earth can I tell you how you're going to realise your own consciousness to the greatest extent? And all one can do is we can share the understandings that we've developed and allow people to make their own decisions and be put in the driving seat. And so, you know, I'd hope it'd be a roadmap, really.
Yeah, I think you've written a book that does give a roadmap, and it's a very interesting read as well. I'm going to thank you for coming. We have to finish now.
Thank you, Iain.
And good luck with the ongoing journey. And thank you very much for watching Conscious TV, and I really recommend Nicola's book. Hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.
Hi there, my name's Nicholas Vesey, and I've written this book called Developing Consciousness, a journey of the roadmap to enlightenment. And what I'd like to do is just to enable a short guided meditation, if you're interested in doing that. It's just a way of opening up your mind to the possibility of a different experience. Now, if you'd like to do this, what I'd like to do is just to find a chair or a place where you can sit with your back upright, and then you can close your eyes and just listen to me while I just do the guided meditation. So if you're lounging on the sofa there, just either sit up or maybe move to another chair, or just get yourself comfortable, and we'll just start the meditation when you've done that. So I'll ask you to do that now. Okay, so in my youth we used to say, "Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin." But what I'll ask you to do now is just to sit squarely on your seat with your hands on your thighs. And when you're ready, close your eyes. Just become aware of the sounds around you and relax. You're completely safe. Notice how your body feels. Go to where you feel any aches and pains, and just note that they're there. Okay, good. Now, put your attention on your feet. Notice how they feel, any heat or pain. Just be aware of them. Okay, now move up to your calves and do the same. Just feel your calves. Now your knees. Now put your attention on your thighs and your buttocks. Put your attention on your genitals. Now move up to your stomach. Be aware of how your stomach feels. And now your chest. Notice your breathing. As you notice your breathing, just deepen your breathing a little and relax even more. Now move up to your neck. Feel your neck and into your head. And just imagine now the space between your ears. A dark void. As you breathe, each breath, imagine the breath filling every part of that space as you breathe in with cool air. Notice how dark it is, no light coming from anywhere. Okay, now put your attention in your nostrils and feel the air coming through them. Okay, now I want you to imagine the space just in front of you from where you're breathing the air, the space in front of your face. I want you to picture in front of you a source of light. It may be the sun, it may be the figure of Christ, it may be a flame, a source of light. But just have it there in front of you. And as you see it, become aware of your breathing again. And breathe that light through your nostrils into the space between your ears. As you do that, you notice that the space is becoming filled with light. And as you breathe that light, it's being breathed right down through your neck into your body, so that your body is becoming filled with light. Down your neck, into your chest, into your arms, filling your stomach, into your seat, down your thighs, into your legs, and finally into your feet. So now your body is filled with that light, and you're glowing with the brightness of it. Just enjoy it, being that light. Okay, now put your attention to the source of that light, and in your own way, give thanks for what you've received. Now ask if you might be the source of some of that light for others. And if you sense that the answer to this question is yes, ask the source of light what you might do to make that happen. What must you do in your life to make that happen? And listen for the answer. Good. Now consider what that might mean for you in your life. Okay. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to gradually open your eyes and come back into the room. Okay, open your eyes. Come back into the room. Thanks very much for participating. Goodbye.